Hopefully it'll take care of several discussion items.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order, please. This is a regular meeting of the Village of Krause governing body. Please find a comfortable seat. Also, if you have a phone, a cell phone, it's kind of a stupid comment, but if you have a cell phone, please put it on vibrate or turn it off so you don't disturb people discussing things during the meeting. And once you've done that, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Murray?
Here.
Councilor Burkett?
Here.
Councilor also Brooke?
Here.
I did that on purpose. Councilor Knight? Here. Councilor Woolman?
Here.
Councilor Miera?
Here.
All right, we're all here. Has everybody had a chance to look over the agenda?
Yes.
I need a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So move.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second?
Mayor,
Yes.
Councilor Murray, I'd like to amend the agenda to add an item to new business under number 7 to discuss placing items on the agenda and just have a discussion. And I think our attorney would probably like to say a few words about that too, if possible.
Can we do that?
Councilor Murray, it is an item that we would have to put on an agenda, but I think you can bring it up during councilors forum.
You can start.
As general conversation and then carry it on from there.
Well, we should be able to amend the agenda, even if it's only a discussion item. I mean, we're not taking any action.
No, but the Open Meetings Act is very specific about agenda items, and if we don't have one on there, then we shouldn't be, I mean, people may want to be here to discuss that item, and then they wouldn't have had any notice of it.
Okay,
So
very good.
That's the issue, I'm sorry.
All right, very well.
Counselor, can I ask a question? Could we have it in the future agenda items part of the meeting?
I think we've talked about putting it on the first meeting in August, haven't we? Didn't we make a comment about that?
That was a different topic we had talked about.
Oh,
putting
I've
on our
forgotten
agenda for
again. Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, we can talk about it at that time as well.
Now, why don't we do that then? Let's make that an agenda item for our August meeting.
I'm sorry, say one more time.
I'm just saying we should put it on the agenda item for August then.
Okay. Yeah, the second meeting in July is going to be pretty full. So it's probably best the first meeting in August, yeah. Okay. So we have a motion to approve and a second, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We have some presentations tonight. The first one is going to be done by our Comprehensive Plan Committee, and I'm assuming it will be a lady in the cast. Flint, sorry. Got bucked off her horse?
Not this time.
Oh, well. It's still a good story. It's still a good story. Still a good story.
That was the cat. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Chris Allen. I'm chair of the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. And I apologize for not making the meeting 2 weeks ago. I was dealing with a broken wrist and coming down with laryngitis, and coming to talk to you just went right out of my head. So I do apologize. I'm closer to me? Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. And I don't have laryngitis. One of my committee members said I don't sound very authoritative when I sound like Mickey Mouse, so I'm glad that that's gone. I want to tell you where we are in the comprehensive plan review process. Right now, what we're doing is meeting with various stakeholders. These include department heads, boards and commissions in the village, as well as organizations that are involved in the village, such as the Historical Society. We have about 44 individuals and groups listed, and we're about halfway through. We've done about 22 meetings. And I think I am very proud, and I think you should be very proud of the people you selected for this committee. When we first met and Chris Hoover said we were going to be meeting once a week, we went, what? We didn't sign up for that. But these people have now stepped forward and are doing 2 to 3 meetings a week. to collect the data that we need to give you a comprehensive plan. The data we are collecting is designed to identify trends and issues, and we are seeing common threads as we make our way through this list. This information that we're collecting will be used to both inform the village-wide survey, which will go out later in the summer, as well as be used to actually draft the comprehensive plan itself. So that's where we are. We're collecting data. We know there's a fairly tight leash on us. We hope to be completed by December, but we'll just have to see. It will take as long as it takes, but we certainly have no intention of going past December, March time period. So I'll stand for any questions. Yes.
Thank you. I know you all are working really hard. But the survey will be out probably maybe in September or so.
I hope earlier than that, but it just depends on how long it takes us to collect all of this data. And we have two members of the team who are charged with looking at all of this data, identifying the trends, and then composing questions that will be as unbiased as possible. I'm very honest, if I were to create a question, it would be very biased. So we have two people who will try and unbias the questions. The survey will be going out both electronically with a QR code, as well as on paper. It will be done in English and in Spanish. So knowing that, it will take time for us to convert the questions to Spanish and then convert the answers back. So that's a little bit of a delay, but it's well worth it for the inclusivity that we're trying to gain. We are doing a lot of publicity. Our goal is to get at least 33% response, if not higher. So we have been spreading the word. We'll be meeting at the growers market. We have some banners ordered that we're going to post up. We'll put flyers in businesses. We're really trying to make sure that everybody answers the survey.
Zach,
Can I ask a question just about that? It's really difficult to get a lot of people to participate and also at the same time keep people from multiply participating. Are you planning to do one per household, one per adult, one per any age in the village? And how are we going to make sure that there isn't somebody doing 13 of them? Are we going to do one per URL? Because that's always, it's a difficult balance.
It is a difficult balance. Our intent is to get one per person, one per resident of the village. In terms of duplication, I'm not sure. We'll have to examine that. It is something I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about people from outside of the village answering the survey. And I'm not sure how to control that. So we're aware of these issues and we'll do the best we can to mitigate them. Any other questions?
Bill.
Is it too early or unfair to ask? You mentioned you're beginning to see general trends, not specifics, but can you tell me where people are leaning and what it looks like?
It's too early and unfair.
I'll accept that answer.
You saved me. Anything else?
Yes, sir.
You said you're meeting often. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said you're meeting often. Where are you meeting at?
Wherever they meet. So, for example, we met with Champ last night at somebody's
Oh,
private
you're
home.
meeting at their places.
Yes, usually it's a board meeting. So tomorrow night, we're meeting with the Historical Society, and I just was told that because of the heat, they're going to be Zooming that meeting. So we'll join them by Zoom. So whatever we have to do to meet with people, we are going there and doing that.
Thank you.
You're really to be commended.
Thank you.
It's a tough job. It took 30 months the first time.
I
Or
know.
no, I shouldn't say first time. The last time it was done, it took 30 months.
You have a group of very talented, very highly motivated individuals who have volunteered their time to do this. And as Councilor Knight said, she's well aware, since her spouse is one of the members, how much time they are putting in. It amazes me.
Although, can I
So-
jump in? I don't ask them any questions because there was an issue of conflict of issues, so interest, I should say. So whenever anybody comes over, I'm someplace else. because I want all my fellow councilmen to know just as much as I do, and not more or less.
Right.
So I just wanted to get that out.
Sure.
I've heard that from the other side as well. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your update.
Okay.
So who's speaking for the Historical Society? Ken?
Good evening to all of you, Mr. Mayor, councilors and council, and Mr. Curry. Want to thank you for inviting us to present to you today.
So Ken, for the tape, identify yourself and your address, please.
Address.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Ken Martinez. I'm president of the Corrales Historical Society. My address is P.O. Box 2291, 401 Chimaha Road, Corrales. I want to thank councilors Miera and Waldman and Murray for inviting us to present tonight. We weren't planning on presenting, but we are more than glad to share with you our thoughts on the Arts Community and Education Center. So we have a PowerPoint presentation that Melanie's going to put up here. Can you all see?
Kevin.
Okay. So I'll just ask you to move slide as we move along. The Corrales Historical Society, first we wanted to give you a background and talk about our mission, what we do, how we do it, and where our thoughts are on community and education. We're a nonprofit organization. We promote the greater appreciation for and understanding of the history and traditions of our village and its recipients today. Next. We are this year celebrating our 50th anniversary, which we're very proud of. We were founded in 1973. One of our founding members is here today, Alice Glover, right there. And as I said, as a volunteer organization, we're dedicated to preserving and maintaining the old church building. But we also do other things. We collect and document the history and the heritage of the village. And very importantly, we provide cultural and educational programs and opportunities for the public. But before we go on to the next one, if I can just point out that picture of the old church there. That's a painting by a well-known artist. His name is Van Dorn Hooker. He died in 2015. And he's the first person to be officially named as the architect for UNM, beginning in 1963 until 1987. And we were lucky enough to have him advise us in the restoration of the old church. He did this painting, and you can tell it's a 1930s version of the church because of the whitewash finish and the fact that there is no door on the south side like we have now. Next. So Corrales Historical Society was formed in 1973. We purchased the old church building from the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. The Archdiocese desanctified the church around 1961 because they built a new church right on Corrales Road. So it was a vacant building, but it was put to use by the Adobe Theater for many years. And the Archdiocese decided that they didn't want to manage it, own it anymore. So the Corrales Historical Society, newly formed, bought it from the Archdiocese. And we deeded it to the village of Corrales. So the village of Corrales owns the building and the property. And that was in 1976. So we agreed with the village at that time in writing that we would manage and preserve and maintain that building for the use of the village and the general public. Next. It's also placed on the National Register of Historic Buildings. It's placed on the State Register of Historic Buildings, and we are proud of maintaining that status. So whenever we try to do anything to upgrade the building itself, we have to go through a lot of hoops with the State Historic Preservation Division to request any kind of changes to the building itself. We just went through that because we're starting the re-plastering, mud plastering of the church on Monday. And that's going to take a month or so. And we hope that's going to be good for another 10 years, 15 years or more. And hopefully next year, or possibly the year after, we plan to do the interior, which is a much more expensive proposition than the exterior. So bottom line is we have a long-term relationship with the village, 50 years. We've been an integral partner in the government, with the government in the village, in the management, preservation, and maintenance of the old church. Next. These are three different eras of the old church. If you can notice, 1948, it still had the whitewash look, and you can tell around the church there was very few homes, any structures around there. 1967, this is when the Archdiocese rented it out for a long period of time, and it kind of got into disrepair. And then today, in 2023, with the current look. Next. So I said we were talking about the Arts Community and Education Center. So just to give you a background about how CHS got involved. The ACE committee began meeting in the spring of 2022. And we were invited to attend, and we attended a couple of meetings. Our past president and one of our board members attended. And it was obvious at that time that the the committee was focused on the theater portion of the planning. And at that time, the two members of the CHS board decided that it probably wasn't very relevant for the CHS to continue the attendance, so they came off. And I came on board in January as the president, and I decided to resume our attendance at the ACE committee meetings. So that happened in January 2023. So as that planning process progressed, we were very happy to hear that we were kind of moving from Performing Arts Center, which is what it was originally called, to Arts Community and Education Center. And that seemed to fit where we were at very well, because we've always had, many years, a desire to have some space to exhibit and showcase the history and the heritage of Corrales. So the community and educational aspect of the center seemed to be a very good fit for what we wanted long term. Next. So the Corrales Historical Society invited the ACE committee to give a presentation to our members and the public on March 13, 2023, which was a very well-attended meeting. It was a lively meeting. A lot of questions were asked. What we learned from that meeting, as we had learned from the meetings of the ACE committee, is that the arts and theater aspects seem to be continuing to take precedence, as evidenced by the square footage that was devoted to the theater portion of the plans. We had seen, I had seen about the 5th, 6th, and 7th version of the architectural plans. I think the 7th version was the last one. And it was similar to earlier versions where the theater portion took about 70% of the entire space of the center, and the other 30% was left for offices, ticket booth, gallery for art, and 2 classrooms. So that was how it evolved. Next. So I just mentioned the architectural drawings showed that after many iterations, it indicated that kind of square footage distribution. And the committee, was assuring us that the plans were conceptual in nature and not necessarily written in stone or written in final ink. So since the ACE committee was going to be dissolving in April 2023, it had a life of 1 year, that there seemed to be that, for us anyway, and for the public, that there weren't going to be any further opportunities to comment on the further planning, development, and programming of the proposed ACE Center. Next. So we wanted to emphasize the fact that the reason we're here is that the Corrales Historical Society are good stewards of the history and heritage of the village. I think we've done a very good job over 50 years to document the heritage, culture, and history through our extensive archives, which are now partially digitized through the University of New Mexico. And we're working to digitize even more over time to make sure that there are no issues with losing that kind of history through fire or any other loss or damage. We also have a long-held desire to find a suitable space to tell the story of the village and its rich cultural history. You know, we have descendant families that we have begun to organize in this past year. We began in June of last year to identify the original descendant families of the founders of the village, which go back, you know, a couple hundred years. And through the hard work of several members, in particular Margarita Garcia Sexton back there, we were able to identify many families and invite them to, for the first time in anyone's memory, to be able to be active participants in what the Historical Society does, but just in general, to be informed about what's going on in the village, and more importantly, to have a voice in what happens in the village. And certainly the ACE Center is going to be a major investment of money, time, energy, and we would like, you know, the descendant families to have a voice in whatever happens in its design and programming. So our goal is to bring that external input that wasn't a part of the original planning committee to bear on whatever comes next, whatever phase 2 is. We say that we would be a good partner with the ACE project as we have demonstrated a history of educational programming and outreach and engagement, as evidenced in all the programming that we do and the current work we're doing with descendant families. Next. This is just a collage of some of that community and outreach that we do. Just to give you some idea, villagers, the fine art show on the top left, villagers looking at Mary Davis's book on the history of Corrales families, a young artist on the far right at the Old Church show showing young images, images of the church done by young people, students. Pueblo pottery, speaker series, mudding of the old wall on the front of the church, the Pimentel family giving a demonstration of their fine guitars, the festival and activities, and on and on. So this is just a sampling of the things that we do all year. I didn't mention that most of our funding comes from these from events that we put on. We rent out the church for music. We rent it out for weddings, and that's our primary source of income to keep the church up. We don't have any other normal income, you know, to keep that church up. So we've been asked, why don't you use the old church as a museum? And, you know, that you can display all the history and archives there. Well, if we did that, we wouldn't be able to preserve and maintain the church because we rent it out empty or with chairs. And we're so popular in terms of a venue for people that we're booked into late 24 with weddings, with series, with concerts. So it's used a lot. This venue is used a lot. Our prices are good, and people love the ambience of the old church for whether it be music or weddings or anything else. So we have a few recommendations to the council. and to the mayor. As expressed during our ACE committee meetings and in our letter to the mayor and to you councilors that you got a copy of, we continue to have a strong interest in showcasing the history and heritage of the village within the ACE Center in a manner yet to determine through community input. The reason we say that we don't have a plan to propose to you today is because we really don't want to have a plan to propose to you, because we need to have the input of everybody, not just the Corrales Historical Society. You know, we're just one part of the village. We need to get everyone's input about what they would like to see done, how it is done, and how that historic preservation can be exhibited in a new beautiful building. So we don't have a plan for you, but we are more than willing to engage in planning with you and with a diverse group of people to make it happen. So it's a village asset, not just an asset for any one particular group. Next. Our second and probably our more important recommendation is that we need a more inclusive, diverse, and transparent community input planning process that reflects the diversity, cultural, ethnic, language, and cultural richness of the village and its history. Our desire is for it to reflect the needs and interests of all Corrales residents. We haven't involved all Corrales residents in the planning so far. It was a small group of people. I think they worked really hard, did a good job of getting it to where it is, but now it's time to open it up to everybody and say, what do you all think about what you want to see happen? Does it look like this building or should it look like something else? You know, we're not wedded to any one particular way that it looks, because we want, you know, the input from everybody to actually help design that building, and after it's built, to program it. And so the diverse input and the transparent community process for us is even more important than an actual exhibit space, although we would like to see that happen too. But the process for us is number one. Next. Third recommendation is we recommend that you, council, to convene a new ACE committee for the next planning phase. We would like to have a seat at that inclusive table to engage in that transparent process with other diverse members of the village as phase 2 of this planning. And lastly, we support a multi-purpose arts community and education center that balances all three parts. You know, some have said the Corrales Historical Society is against the ACE building. We're not. We are in favor of having a multi-purpose center that serves the entire community. And we will do everything we can to make it a reality with that inclusive process, because we want to make it be successful, and we want all Corraleños, all diverse ethnicities to be able to say, I had a part in helping design that, and this was my part, and I see it reflected in the new design and building. So we hope that this building serves as a gathering place for all Corraleños. The last slide here, almost the last slide, is some rendering of what, you know, this display, this exhibit might look like. These are from the internet and from our local partner here, IDEUM. You all know IDEUM, and I had a meeting with Mr. Jim Spadaccini and told him what our thoughts were about exhibiting the history and the heritage of the village. Well, he got very excited. He said, we can help you do that. We want to be your partner. How can we help? We'll donate, you know, these display boards to you. I mean, he was just on board. He wanted to get us something next month. I said, wait, hold on, slow down. We're not even close to that yet. But he's on board. And, you know, he's willing to work with, you know, whoever it is, a new committee to help us, you know, get to that point where we have the most up-to-date technology with local talent. And I think that's really important, to use our own village business to help us make this happen. And next, our last slide. As Mary Davis is quoted as saying, love of a place comes from knowing its history and its people. And that's Mary Davis, our historian for the village of Corrales, and our Corrales Historical Society member and board member. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Does anybody have any questions? Stuart?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I think that's a very informative presentation. So any thoughts about maybe the number or the size of what you would need for displaying these historical facts or artifacts, or have you given any thought about that, about the size of what you would like?
Well, I think with this kind of technology, it wouldn't have to be a lot of space, I don't think. Because if it's digitized, of course, it would be really nice to have, all the hands-on things that, museums do have. And we're not thinking in terms of quote museum, we're thinking of a space. When you think of museum, you think of a very complicated process that involves so many steps, and we don't want to complicate it that much. So that's why we don't use the word museum. We want an exhibit space. We're thinking of a room. I don't know, we haven't thought about what size room, but a room that, we could have both this technology as well as some hands-on things that, people can touch and manipulate and see in person.
And also, I was also thinking that if you're really booked up that far in advance, it seems to me that the theater portion of that might give you an advantage of having dual presentations, one at the old church, maybe one at the ACE facility, either for music or for educational purposes. So I do appreciate you coming forth tonight and giving your opinion about this.
Thank you, Councilman.
Anyone else? Yes, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for that presentation. And I think you've not opened up our eyes, because I think our eyes are open, but I think every so often we need to be reminded of the fact that the cultural experiences that we have here are highlighted by something new that we're bringing, and that's the building. But the building, unless it's thought about that prior to the building of the building, you'll end up with, oh, we should have, and we should have, and then we're putting on a little addition a couple of years later on for something that we knew that all was there all along. And I think that's the part that I want to bring attention to. I like the fact that it was the programming is just as important as the building of the building. And if that isn't thought about in the discussion and the development, then we miss the cultural part, or we miss the educational part, or we missed both of those altogether being involved. And so I think the design of the building has to incorporate that from the very go. And I want to thank you for bringing some ideas and some attention to that atmosphere that is so needed if we're going to be putting sufficient amount of money. I'm going to have to really dumb question, but sometimes you only ask dumb question, we know the answer to it. We don't own that building yet, do we, Mr. Mayor? We don't own that property or anything. Where are we
We
at?
own the property,
We own the property,
but there is no building.
but there is no building. And because of that, makes sense of where I was coming from. Don't want to be building that building without us thinking about the cultural and the
Correct.
all together from the very beginning. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Just to
Anyone
follow,
else?
excuse me, just to follow up to your comment, I know from your previous job, you were involved with Albuquerque Foundation, schools, APS Foundation. And that's another thing that we really, as a Corrales Historical Society, we want to invest in our young people. And we want to see whatever new design or whatever design it's going to be, that it really emphasize that it be student-friendly, children-friendly, and that programming and, plays and whatever else needs that, like the Corrales Elementary School could use, that be part of the planning, is that because our children are our future, and we really want to make sure that they are invested in and they are proud of whatever building that they have in order to do whatever performances they have at that, bigger level than their little school auditorium.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Ken, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. your turn.
Good evening, councilors, members of
Here we
the,
Charts.
okay. Members of the council, I'm Jill Sweeney from Sherman and Howard, and here to talk to you a little bit about your general obligation bond program. I'm going to give a very brief introduction and then turn it over to Brad Anks from Stifel, who will give you some historical tax information and debt profile, and then we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming election and what that might look like, and what questions perhaps will be included in the capital financing program going forward. So, there's Brad. So if some of you recall that back in 2019, with the assistance of the Municipal League and others, the village established a finance team to work on a regular long-term general obligation bond program for the benefit of the village. And the intent of that program is to facilitate capital improvement planning and support the infrastructure needs of the village on an ongoing basis, holding the mill levy rate constant at a 2018 level. And so what that involves, like many other jurisdictions in the state, is having an election every other year, issuing debt every other year, getting to a point where we know what we're looking at as far as capital improvements in the short, medium, and long run, and then figure out how we bring all the different buckets together in order to finance the priorities of the village. And so before we get into a discussion about what those priorities might be for the next bond cycle, I'll turn it over to Brad, who has a brief PowerPoint presentation, as I said, on some historical tax information and the current debt profile of the village. Brad?
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and good to be with you, Mayor and councilors. This is Brad Angst. I'm with Stifel Public Finance, and we serve as the village's financial advisor and help you raise funds for your capital projects when the time comes. As Jill mentioned, back in 2018, the village set up a bonding program, a finance program, in order to finance capital improvements within the village. And over the years, the village has been able to finance some road improvements, do some real estate acquisition, and for easements and conservation easements, and a variety of other things. So we are at the time now where it's time to, as Jill mentioned, lock in your next projects that you'll want to work on and prepare for the upcoming November election. It is that time in your renewal cycle. Are you able to pull up the presentation? Great, thanks, Melanie. We could go to slide 5. Perfect, thank you. So this is a look at your historical tax rates going back to 2016. And I want to direct you to that middle column, the GO debt service levy. That's what I work with you on. And as I mentioned, back in 2018, you established a level of 2.4 mils as a cap. And you did that by going to your voters, asking them for approval. And we've looked to maintain that amount ever since. In 2019, there was a little bit of a drop. There wasn't a payment that was due that year, but you'll see in 2020, 21, and 22, all around that 2.4 mark. The reason it doesn't stay exactly at 2.4 as the property values within the village limits grow or change, a little bit different tax rate or mill levy is needed in order to provide for your payments. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned that mill levy rate is applied against your assessed valuation. This is a look on the left-hand side of the page at the historical assessed valuation. And so we get these numbers, looking at the bottom left table, the tax and revenue department works with all the county assessors to collect this information. And coming up here in July and August timeframe, we will get the updated preliminary valuation. And that's when we use the new number to calculate what the tax levy and mill rate should be for next year. I'll direct you to the top right now. That total valuation last year is 489. That's being used for this year's budget. You're allowed to do GO bonds and bond for up to 4% of that. So your capacity is 19.6 million of bonds. Now the village hasn't gone out for near that amount. Currently you have about 5.6 million of bonds outstanding that you pay off amounts every year. And so you'll see on the bottom table there on the right, it grows every year as you make those payments. Excuse me. So as you move out and once we get into 2024, you'll actually have about 15.7 million of additional bonding capacity, assuming that you and your voters approve new projects. Next slide, please. And on to the next. This is just a quick summary of the current different bonds that are outstanding. You'll see there's 5 of them currently that you continue to pay on, and they range in interest rates from 0.14% up to about 3.05. So these were all done over the last 5 years or so when we were in a very low interest rate environment. We've come up some on those rates. Municipal and tax exempt rates are still in the 4 to 5% range though, so still low cost of capital. Next slide, please. This is just a little more detail of each one of those bonds and the payments. If we could move on to the next. So this is a look at your payments on an annual basis from each one of those bonds is represented by a different color. And then as you move forward, you'll see that the payments start to drop off. And so that's what I was describing to you on the front end of this presentation when Ms. Sweeney was talking about. You all have set up a bond and capital improvement cycle plan. And so what we aim to do is have a continual drop off in your debt service. And this allows us to layer on every couple of years a new financing so that you don't increase your mill levy payments. And so in 2025, you have additional capacity. That's why we are recommending you go to a November 23 election, which allows, allows you to issue the bonds or sell the bonds in 2024. And that first payment is actually in 25. So it's a long process, but it's one we got to get started with today. Next slide, please. You also have a couple of GRT revenue bonds. So instead of using property taxes to pay back these bonds, they actually have a GRT pledge. These were done quite a bit further back, the first one in 2014. And they were done on a level debt service basis. If you go to the next slide, I can show you what I mean by that. So basically your payments are level on an annual basis because, you're to pair with the GRT collections. GRT are also an important part for the village's operations. So we don't want to layer on more than that unless you have excess that you would have access to. Moving on to the next section. This is a look at the timeline of the bond election. So I know it says 4 million here. You actually coming up here this spring have capacity for about 2 to 2.5 million without increasing your mill levy. And that's always been priority number one. Make sure that we keep you at 2.4 or lower. And so in order to do that, we are recommending approximately 2 to 2.5 million of projects be considered at the upcoming election. The reason it says 4 here is because when you go out for an election, it's actually valid for 4 years. And so if you had a desire not to go back out in 2 years from now, you could go ahead and do that now. But we do, like you to look at each project on its own and go to the voters on each project. So, for this upcoming one, we're really kind of focused in on that 2 million. So as I mentioned, I'm going to just kind of carry you along there on that bottom timeline. We are here in the summer of 2023 in the evaluation of the projects. So here next month in August, at your August 8th meeting, is when you have to actually call the election. So before that date, we need to have the projects determined. And we need to, at that August 8th meeting, have the council approve calling that election. Then in November, when you call that election, that allows your voters and your citizens to say whether or not they want to continue the program and the projects that you have. So first Tuesday in November, there's a approval and a little bit of a wait period after that. You have to certify the results of that election, but that brings us to the spring of 2024, when we would look to sell your next GO bond and provide you funding in hand. And then from there on, it just flows through to some of the additional timelines and additional financings. We do have this set up so that every 2 years you can access another approximate 2 million to 2.5 each cycle, each time of the cycle. Next slide, please. This is a look at the math behind proving up that we can keep your mill levy at 2.4 or lower. And so what you're looking at here in the middle row is again a spring 2024 election. The payments that would come for that approximately $2 million bond. And then over on the right-hand side, we have your total debt service payments and the projected mill levy based on a conservative amount here and a conservative amount of growth. Next slide. Another just graphical representation. So the dark blue is your existing debt payments and bond portfolio. The orange, green, and blue represent a 2024 issuance in orange, a 2026 in green, and a 2028 in blue. Again, just showing you how the cycle works so that you're able to continually take care of deferred maintenance projects or new capital projects that you all determine to put in front of your voters. That concludes the presentation. Again, we wanted to come to you with a recommended amount, approximately 2 million, to bring to your voters. That's available for your priorities and the capital project needs of the village. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Got a bunch. Councilor Knight.
Yeah, with the increase of interest rates, would our interest rate be a lot higher than they have been in the past?
They'd be higher than they've been over the last 5-6 years. Those were all-time lows. But the interest rates today are actually still below the historical averages. As I mentioned earlier on, it's about 4 to 5% right now is the borrowing cost for a 20-year bond. We actually pay off yours a lot faster. We've been structuring 10 to 12-year repayments. So that'd probably be closer to that 4% range. So a little bit higher than you've seen over the last 5 years, but still a low cost of capital. And we work that into our numbers that we presented tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. Brad, so earlier, one of the first two slides, you showed an evaluation, it looks like of about 8.7% increase in our valuation figure. Do you have an idea why it was so high compared to the previous years where it only ran about 4 or 5%?
Yeah, that was we saw that across the state. We saw that across the country. That was a big real estate boom that happened kind of midway through COVID, when a lot of the real estate valuations of homes went up. We saw it in a lot of areas away from the coast, as you know, Californians and New Yorkers were trying to get to find some more space and get away from some of the crowded areas that were shut down. So that was somewhat of a one-time increase, but for our projections and our use looking into the future, we actually use a 3% rate. So that's about half of what your average growth rate has been.
So I'll kind of follow up on Councilor Knight's question. Do they allow refinancing if the interest rates are high and the rates drop? Can we refinance the bond?
Yes, sir. We call that a call option, and we can attach that to a bond. It's a structuring feature that we do often, especially when interest rates start to increase like this. So your existing bonds don't have that because the interest rates were so low. But any bonds that we've done over the past year or so, once interest rates increase, we are adding in that feature, and we would recommend it for you all. Yes, is the short answer.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Alstenbrook?
Thank you, Mayor. The last slide you showed has a bullet at the top. The 2020 bond election was for 4 million, and there's 2 million authorization sold in 2021. Does that mean there's some remaining authorization that's unsold?
No, you've sold all of your remaining authorization is down to zero, and I believe that was a carryover of an old bullet item that we need to update.
That was my understanding. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Brad, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, members of the council, Mayor, now is the opportunity to discuss next steps and prepare for the November 7th election. The idea, as Brad said, is to request authorization for 2 or 2.5 million that would maintain the 2.4 mil capital finance program without a tax increase, and then also leave you some room for future projects, as Brad showed on that slide, with that diminishing return. We never know what might happen, what those needs might be, how priorities might change, whether, for example, we might get ARPA money. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. So some questions that have been suggested to be submitted to the voters are perhaps $1 million toward the plan and design of the A Center that the Historical Society was discussing, perhaps $1 million for fire facilities and equipment. We can't slice and dice and do 8 questions for $25,000, right? That's not cost efficient. We want to make sure that we have questions that prioritize the needs of the village and can complete finite projects or phases of the projects. And I know your mayor and Mr. Curry and staff have been worked diligently on putting together a capital improvement plan and start to prioritize those needs. Now is the time to be able to think about that, have have some discussion, and we come back to you at your regularly scheduled meeting on August 8th with a bond election resolution. Looks the same as all of the other election resolutions, but it has those new questions on it. We'd ask for your consideration at that meeting, and then work diligently with the clerk to make sure that those questions are submitted to the county and then submitted on to the Secretary of State on or before August 29th. So we have a very strict timeline and calendar because it is a regular election, so your ballot will be big, right?
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we know what those questions are, that we reserve space for those questions, that we follow the process and work with all of our state and local government counterparts in ensuring that those questions get on the ballot. So we wanted to give you a chance this evening to think about those things, to have some discussion, to come back, and so with the goal of making sure that we're all ready to consider that election resolution on August 8th. So informational item on opportunity for discussion, or opportunity to spend some time thinking about it. You're not being asked to consider anything tonight.
Councilor Burkett?
Yeah, thank you guys very much for the presentation. That was very helpful. I'm happy to hear that we have some bonding capacity. My inclination would be to go closer to the 2.5 million if we have the capacity to do so, with interest rates climbing and with inflation rates as high as they are. I think anytime we can get money for markedly less than inflation, we're doing a service to the village.
Fair point.
I would also like to talk about conservation easements. I know there's a couple properties that are have interested landowners. That is a finite resource that I think is going away very, very quickly. I think it's very much in line with the Corralica Historic Society, the conservation stuff they have. I think it helps with fire suppression. I know not as much as actual fire suppression, but having 30 less houses on 30 acres would be beneficial. I know there's 13 acres currently amongst two properties that would be really interested in that. So with the limited timeline, I guess my question after all that rambling is, what do we need to do to discuss what our priorities are? Because we're not going to have multiple meetings to do this, so we need to get on the same page pretty quickly. And I think that's some low-hanging fruit, and I think that's something that the village has done really well with in the past, and we're going to look back 20 years from now and be very upset that we didn't do well with it this bond cycle as well, if we don't.
And I know your mayor and staff have been meeting and discussing the capital improvement plan, and that has come up, and we'll put that in the hopper as we are moving and jiggling those numbers around.
I mean, just a brief follow-up. There's no other source of money for these conservation easements. We have many additional sources for, fire suppression, ICIP. They really do a great job of giving us fire suppression money. I think cultural things like ACE or FACE or whatever the acronym du jour is. I think there's money within ICIP for that as well. The sole source of funding capabilities for conservation easements is bonds, at least historically in the village. And so we really need to not miss an opportunity there.
This was actually a presentation, not for discussion or debate. We are planning on having that discussion or debate at another time.
Mayor, it says discussion on the agenda.
Well, it's discussion of the bond presentation, not discussion of bonds. But go ahead. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So my understanding is this bond election would be for 4 million total.
No, Madam Chair, Councilor Murray, we're looking at something at 2 or 2.5.
Okay.
That would continue to give you space as you go forward, to keep prioritizing as you move toward issuing about 2.5 million every other year.
So we would have another election in 2 years, and then for the remaining amount, or however amount bonding capacity we would have left?
Yes.
Councilor Knight, did you have a question?
Well, it was kind of just to add on to what Councilor Burkett said. Just, I know last time when we had a bond issue, and it was specifically for conservancy easements there, that all of a sudden we had this money and we didn't have anybody wanting to put their property into the easements. So I just want to remind that, you know, we can't have this money and then all of a sudden start looking for people. We need to have them available, like we kind of have an idea of where we're going to put that money. Just a thought out there. Because last time it was difficult to find people.
We will certainly have that discussion.
So just, and from a purely bond legal perspective, you certainly want to be aware when we go out to the voters and we look to issue tax exempt bonds, we have 4 years in which to issue those bonds. That's one restriction. And we have to have a reasonable expectation that those proceeds will be spent within 3 years following the issuance. So those are the technical federal tax rules that sort of go to what you're saying. We, you know, oftentimes we have the discussion about, is the project shovel ready? Is the road shovel ready? Is the park shovel ready? Is the library improvement shovel ready? Whatever it is, knowing and understanding that our state constitution limits the categories for which we can issue general obligation bonds. So a little, just a little, that's the sort of the legal and technical framework around the discussion you're having on the easements, because you do want to be able to be ready. You also want to make sure that the money matches, right? Are we looking at 500,000? Are we looking at $1 million? And how do we fit the pieces of the puzzle together so that we're within our parameters?
Councilor Mira.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you stating that we're going to be having that discussion. I just want to get my date straight. Was that August the 8th when we have to have that resolution prepared, but August the 29th when you send it to the Secretary of State, or is that
Correct.
August the 8th, the resolution?
Yes,
Deadline?
so Madam Chair, Councilor Miera, yes, August 8th would be the deadline, when we would come back to you with the actual election resolution. You know, we're working ahead, we have that resolution prepared. Of course, the questions still need to be tweaked, and you remember that we need extra time. We have to do the translation into Spanish. We have to submit it. You know, we have a lot of technical steps that have to happen after that August 8th deadline, between August 8th and August 29th. And so we have to make sure that the questions are considered by your governing body on that date, so that translations can be done, so that publications can be made, so that we can make the submission deadline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Bill.
Thanks, Mayor. How much specificity is needed in the resolution? In other words, if we go out for some conservation easements, we don't have to specify necessarily at that point what properties we're looking at, do we?
Madam Chair, Councilor Waldman, no, but we do have to be fairly specific on the category and what we're going to spend that money for, right? We're not going to say the property at this address. And it's just like we want to make sure that we're being specific so that the voters know and understand what they're voting on, but we also want to make sure that we have a little bit of flexibility, knowing that things change, and especially over a 4-year period. So that's why you see, let's just call it in a traditional question. Let's take roads, because those are easy, right? That's why it always says plan, design, construct, purchase easements, you know, all of those things, knowing that we have projects in mind, right? Your capital improvement program says, gee, this is how we got to that number, but knowing and understanding that we need to be flexible as circumstances change, as we've seen in this last few years. Of course, we have limited flexibility, right? You have to spend your GO bond proceeds in the category in which the question was asked. So if you do a road bond, you can't take the road bond money and spend it on conservation easements. But if you needed to deviate from your original plan, you could spend that road bond money on another road if you had to. So again, just sort of meat on the bones of the limitations and that we have in administrative.
you wanna say
over the
something?
sidewalk.
Thank you.
I mean, just two quick things. One is, in this situation, I mean, I'm aware of 2 properties and a third of undetermined size that are interested. But more specifically, a question for the presentation. What do we need to do between now and August 8th then to where we can have an open discussion? Because I'm worried with only 2 meetings between now and us having to make a final decision, we're going to get one option and we're going to have the ability to say yes or no, and we're going to run out of time to have a discussion about a second option.
So the discussion can be held at a meeting. And then we can come up with the questions. And the input from the citizens will be their vote. They will get to choose the 2 or 3 questions that they agree with.
Do we
If
have
they
to
want
publish
to,
and post
they
the
want to
questions
fund
before we
something
discuss
for
them?
the arts community, education building. If they want to buy open land, they can vote for it.
Okay, so for our discussion purposes, do we have to have any publishing, posting time requirements before we can discuss something to put on the ballot?
We have to have it on the agenda.
Just,
Okay,
just the
so-
regular
So the normal
72
7
hours.
days. Okay.
Yes, sir, Counselor Alsabro.
Just as a quick follow-up, at what point do we need to specify the ballot language?
That really, excuse me, that really needs to be approved August 8th, because as Jill said, we have to have the translations done, and it really needs to be to the Secretary of State before August 29th. So if we send it on the 29th, that might be too late. So it's the language in the election code says before August 29th.
Counselor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. So the other question I have, so we have, say we approve this in November, we have 4 years to issue the bonds, is that correct?
Yes,
What
sir.
does that do to the mill levy in between if we don't issue those bonds except for 4 years later? I mean, does that lower the mill levy then?
It
for the
could, yeah,
period?
yeah. Every year, the Department of Finance and Administration will revisit and set that mill.
But
set
how does
mill
that
rate.
help us maintain that mill levy at 2.4 that we would like to keep?
No, I'll turn it over to Brad if he's still around and let him talk a little bit more about the technicalities of that. But that's why we alternate in every other year.
Well, I understand that part, but I'm just somewhat concerned that if we approve the bond resolution, but we don't issue the bonds until 4 years later, then our mill levy is,
Correct, because you don't, Madam Chair, Councilor Murray,
May I
correct,
say-
because we haven't, because we don't have the debt service
Right.
necessary to keep that mill levy up. And that's why when we're having this discussion here, we're focusing on, do we have projects that are quote unquote priority and quote unquote shovel ready? Right, because we want to be able to issue as soon as we can. So that's why Brad mentioned we'd intend to go to the market in the spring of 2024. And we want those election, the desire is that election resolution has 2 questions or 3 questions, whatever it is, in amounts that make sense for discrete authorized projects that can be, or phases of projects that can be completed and that add up to somewhere between 2 million and 2.5 million. So in the example that we gave, $1 million for the A Center, $1 million for fire, right? And that adds up to 2. That gives you, if you want to push that envelope for this year, that gives you $500,000 extra. Not to say that you couldn't juggle those around in other, but to cap at 2.5, somewhere between 2.5,
so that kind of
2
brings
or
up
3
the other
questions.
question. If you, say we do approve a project, but we spend less than what it originally we bonded for,
Mhm.
we still have 3 years to have to spend that money. Do we spend it on, can we still spend it within the project itself?
Yeah.
Towards the project
Right,
without.
and then at
any
some
penalty.
point, it washes out, right? It comes out of the bottom of the waterfall. You've paid off all of your debt service. Any funds you have left go out for general purposes. But we're very careful in sizing, as careful as we can be in sizing the transaction. So we've been remarkably close. There's not a lot. There's maybe 5 figures or less washing out of any of your bonds that have been paid off.
Thank
So
you.
really close.
Our goal is not to borrow money unless we have something to spend it on quickly. I mean, there's no reason to ask people, to pay more tax, well, not more taxes, but to pay the tax and then sit on it for 4 years or sit on it for 2. We'd like to have something ready to go. We've identified a number of items in our ICIP that are necessary. So those are the first runs we think of, first items we would approach. We can have some of that discussion. I think that's on later on this evening. Okay, so I guess, are we finished?
I think we are. I think we have
Okay.
a lot to think about, and we will, I know you all have a lot of work and discussion, and we
We'll-
will
we'll-
keep in touch, and we'll
We'll
see you
certainly
on
move forward,
the
yeah.
8th.
Brad, thank you very much. If you're still there.
My pleasure. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Thanks one more time. Let's move on to the administrator's report. Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mayor. We'll start off with Tanya giving her health update.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilor, Administrator Curry. As usual, not a lot to report. I do know that our tests, I'm hoping they're going out proactively in the village, but we have had a lot of COVID tests go out in the last few days. I also know that we have had multiple COVID patients in the village that we've had to respond to, which we haven't been doing for a while. The numbers for wastewater are going up, but not up rapidly, but they are looking like they're going up some. The hospitalization last week, we're running about 15 people in the hospital. Right now we're running about 20. Don't know if that is maybe because of holiday. I'll keep watching to see if that trend is changing. The state has completely stopped giving death information, and it looks like they're not giving it to CDC. In the last 7 days in the United States, there's only been around little less than 6,500 people in the hospital, which is good. Booster shots are still available. We know that people who have not gotten who are over 65 and have either not gotten a bivalent or are more than 4 months have very little immunity to keep them from getting COVID and less to keep them out of the hospital. We're going to keep monitoring. Moderna and some of the other vaccine providers are supposed to be giving information out soon on the fall booster, which will be the XBB series. We still have tests available. We actually have a full shot clinic for tomorrow, which we normally don't. We're normally running 4 or 5 people each time. This one's full. Can open more up if we need it, but I usually see an uptick in vaccines. People wanting vaccines as they know their neighbors have COVID. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Knight.
Thanks, Tanya, for the update. Will there be new vaccines in the fall? Like you usually get your flu shot in the fall. Are they going to do boosters or a different kind of vaccine in the fall?
Yeah, the FDA and the CDC already approved the new vaccine formula. It will be with the XBB variant. It'll be a monovalent, not a bivalent like now. Right now we have the original COVID strain, an Omicron BA4, BA5 strain in there. The new vaccine for fall will be an XBB. I believe it's XBB 1.5. Now we are still seeing XBB 1.5, but we're starting to see more offshoots from that strain that are variants, but they won't catch up to them. I know Pfizer and Moderna are doing those strains. I do not know if Novavax is going to be doing that. J&J no longer produces a vaccine at all. So that's what we've got. They will also be commercialized vaccine, which means they will be available at pharmacies and places who pay for the vaccine up front. Which one of the problems with that is I've had a family with young children call me today. They'd gotten their first vaccine for their children that are under 5 in November and find a place to give them their second or third shot because no one's carrying it because you have to get so many in, and Pfizer has to be stored at ultra low. You know, our freezer set at negative 93 degrees. It's only good in a refrigerator for 10 weeks, which is longer than Moderna, but 10 weeks refrigerator. And once opened, you have to throw it out at 12 hours. So a lot of places are carrying vaccines right now, but we were lucky enough. She called and we got her and her children in right away.
Okay, thanks for the info.
Anyone else?
Okay, just a couple of quick updates. For those of you who are interested, I know it was brought up at the last meeting that we had the vehicle auction, police cars. We sold all 14 vehicles. And a big shout out to Michael Chavez and to the folks at Parks and Rec that helped him get those together. And the second part of that good news is that they've all been paid for and they've all been taken away for a grand total of $20,937. That money will go into the general fund of the village. Another update for those of you who have been swimming in the wonderful, refreshing, sharp mountain water of the pool. A heater is in sight. And so just wanted to keep that in mind. And also, I'll just speak for Lynn here. The pool will close on August 6th. And the reason why the pool closes on August 6th is because Lynn's lifeguards go back to school. And he does a great job every year of going out and recruiting lifeguards from primarily students in high school that are on athletic teams. And so they start back to school and then they are not lifeguarding anymore. And we need to have that presence there all the time. So keep those data in mind, and we hopefully will have a heater before the wintertime comes. And just one other event, we've talked about it a couple times today over at the pool last week, and this is the second time that it's happened, is it was a beautiful day out there, and all of a sudden a New Mexico dust devil, microburst, whatever you want to call it, came along and blew the lifeguard tower over while the lifeguard was on it. And the other lifeguards rushed to him to make sure that they were all right, and they were. But Lynn reports that that's the second time that's happened in a number of years, and so it's a
Hazardous duty.
yeah. So those are interesting things that happen over there at the pool, but it's a great pool, and Lynn has had a lot of issues with it this year because of some of the water, and he's moved to correct it right away, and so I just want to give a shout out to him and his crew for their activities. Next, I'd like to have Marion come up on the screen. There are so many cool activities. I don't know how much time any of you spend at the library, but we have so many activities going on over there for all age groups. And today she reported on some things that are going on this week and next week regarding activities for young folks. So I just asked her to come on the screen tonight to give you guys a quick update.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Can everyone hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, we've had a lot of programs going on. It's the last couple weeks of our summer reading program. So I guess the easiest way to do this is just days of the week. So Mondays at 2 o'clock, we have children's programs indoors in the air conditioning. So Monday the 17th is Kinetic Sand, which is some fun little project that our new Youth Services librarian Megan has come up with. She's been very inventive about these things. And then Monday the 24th is homemade ice cream. So I expect there'll be a good crowd for that. So do bring the grandchildren to that one. Tuesday evenings, 6 o'clock. These are our big productions. Tuesday the 18th is Library Bingo. That one is indoors. So we'll all be in the air conditioning. And then Tuesday the 25th is the Corrales Fire Department. So it's a family picnic in the park with the fire department and their truck. And I believe there might be a fire hose involved. So people are invited to bring their bathing suits. Wednesday mornings is always story time at 10 o'clock. We've been having them out in the park, but Wednesday the 19th is a very special story time featuring our very own Michael Chavez and the Public Works Department and some large machinery, I think, which we did it last year and it was a big hit. And then Thursday afternoons at 1, there are movies in the library. So this Thursday, the 13th, is Wonder. And then Thursday, the 20th, is Moana. So we serve popcorn and M&Ms, and it's nice and cool. And then Friday afternoons are a couple of programs for teenagers. This Friday, the 14th, is teen candle making. And then Friday the 21st is teen zine making, as in online zine, another thing that Megan seems to know a lot about. So do send the grandchildren to come and visit us, and we'd be so happy to see you. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you, Marion. And my last thing is, I have no further update on the Gonzalez property.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which one is first? Bill? Okay, Stuart?
Start down that end.
Okay, Bill.
Hey, just a quick question, Ron. I noticed that it looks like the wall for the animal services building is almost complete, or is complete. Can you give us an update of where we are in the building and if we're still on schedule for the August 28th ribbon cutting?
I'll let Melanie do that since she's been in charge of that pretty.
As of right now, we are still on target for that August 30th delivery date for the building itself. And then we can schedule a ribbon cutting as soon as we make sure it's in and all operating in full.
Do you know how much time between when the building is delivered and the opening could be? Plumbing, electrical, how long that might take?
I don't know for sure. I'll find out for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Stuart, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I had an inquiry earlier this week about Meadowlark and drainage. I seem to remember at one time we had talked about a drainage pipe connecting Meadowlark over to the Scaffold drainage facility. Is that something that we're still waiting on funding for to complete?
There is nothing that runs down the center of it at this point that connects at the bottom. And so we are still looking at that with our engineer Groman. And one of the things we're looking at Meadowlark in general. You know, I think I've reported to the council before that we're looking at the site triangles. We continue to look at the site triangles and look at some other alternatives that we may pursue. And included in all that are some of the drainage questions that you bring up.
Okay, and also, I would also, I don't know if we can do this or not, but I would like to make a formal request that Ron, that you direct the village engineer to do a traffic study on La Entrada from Corrales Road over to Loma Larga. That way, you know, it seems to me that especially when I'm on the Metropolitan Transportation Board, their big issue is safety. And I think that ought to be our big issue as well when it comes to the roadways and the pedestrians and equestrian and bicyclists within this village. And there's been a lot of activity, especially on Nextdoor. If you follow Nextdoor at all, or if your spouse does, there's been a lot of activity about some inappropriate behaviors on La Entrada. And I know I talked to the chief briefly about it tonight, and he says that the individual has been warned. But I think given that we've had Rick Toller and we've had Garrett Allen up here talking about safety on La Entrada, I think it's important that we do the traffic study regardless and get it in place and then take a look at it, and we'll, as council, then we can make a decision on what we want to go forward with. But I would appreciate if you would direct the village engineer to do that for us.
Okay. We're going to move on to the council's forum. This section is for informational purposes only, not for discussion or debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. Councilors, who's first? Councilor Alsobrook.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. Since we're going to be taking under consideration language for bond measure, I'd like us to be careful about how we describe the consequences of bonds, because it's very common for us to say it doesn't raise your taxes. What we mean is it doesn't raise the mill rate. We saw over an 8% increase in property values year over year, which means that actual money went out of my wallet and everyone else's. So I think we have to be careful and say that it's not that your taxes aren't going to go, but the rate remains the same. And then as a corollary to that, so usually it's, we're going to keep the mill rate the same, or, you know, we could go crazy with more bonds and have a higher mill rate. But we leave out the third option, which is, and I understand justifications for the bonds, but the third option is we don't go out for bonds and the mill rate drops, and then you have less taxes coming out. So that's the unspoken one that no one ever mentions. And I think we just need to be careful how we phrase this when we go out to present everything to the village.
Sure enough. Okay. Okay, well, let's move on then to Corleone's Forum. This section is for informational purposes only, not for discussion or debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. There's a 3-minute time limit. According to Village Code, Section 2-60, regarding public decorum during a meeting, no person shall act in a disorderly manner, nor while addressing the governing body shall any person make any personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks. The presiding officer may bar anyone acting improperly from continuing his address of the governing body. Melanie.
First up, we have Mr. Rick Toller. If you could please state your name and address for the record, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, Rick Toller, 483 Hanson Road. Here I am again, singing the same tune. We were expecting to see a motion to lower the speed limit on West La Entrada, and we find that it was not allowed on the agenda. The stated reasons were that more research was needed to be done as to whether permission was needed from NMDOT and whether a traffic study was needed. Stuart, I appreciate your asking for a traffic study, but as I said at the last meeting, I asked Mr. Audio now 8 weeks ago and was told that there was no requirement to ask the DOT. I spoke right after that last meeting to Margaret Haynes in engineering at DOT. I'll give you her number if you guys can't get a hold of her yourselves. They don't have anything to say about what you do on the village roads unless you're changing an intersection with a state highway. And I got these answers almost instantaneously. I don't know why the village is unable to do so. Another thing that has been brought up is that the ordinance says something about a traffic study. The ordinance only says that no person shall drive a vehicle at a speed greater than X. No person shall drive a vehicle at a speed greater than the lawful posted speed limit as determined by an engineering study and traffic investigation, etc. But it also says, or local ordinance as provided by state statutes. There is nothing that I can find, and I would like to have someone find it for me. There is nothing in the ordinances of the Village of Corrales that says anything about the process for changing the speed limits. Nothing. But what it does say in the ordinance is that in every event, speed shall be so controlled as may be necessary to avoid colliding with any person, vehicle, or other thing, or on or entering the street. I have in writing from the chief of police that West La Entrada is not safe for pedestrians or equestrians or bicyclists. The decision on speed limits is squarely in the hands of the mayor and the council. I don't think you even need to vote on this issue, but I think it's a good opportunity for you to show that you care about the safety and security of the citizens in the village, or that you don't. And I now hear that the next meeting is going to be, quote, very busy. And I hope that is not an excuse to avoid putting this on the agenda for the next meeting. I urge you once again to stripe the road, lower the speed limit, add a couple of speed limit signs, and get this off the dead center before somebody gets hurt. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Garrett Allen. Again, if you could state your name and address for the record, you will also have 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Garrett Allen. I live at 227 West La Entrada. So as you know, West La Entrada is at its narrow point, 19 feet in width. So narrow that the village won't mark the shoulders because I am told they require an 11-foot lane. The other east-west roadways connecting Corrales Road to Loma Larga measure 24 feet. In spite of this narrow width, there are 0 traffic calming measures on West La Entrada, despite being the official bike path through to the library, despite the police chief suggesting it not be used by pedestrians, or if it is, that it be used with extreme caution. A World Health Organization study concluded that a pedestrian struck by a vehicle traveling at 40 miles an hour has a 15% chance of survival. Less if that pedestrian is a child. At 20 miles an hour, the chances of survival increase to 90%. As speed in a collision decreases, the chance of survival substantially increases. As you know, these meetings are often about various topics of safety. This one issue is no more than safety versus the convenience of speed. There is no convenience enduring a decreased quality of life in the village, no convenience in an emergency room visit, and no convenience in attending a funeral of a child. Tonight, I'm again asking you, Mayor and councilors, to lower the speed limit on West La Entrada. Prioritize speeding enforcement in the village. Consider this project shovel-ready.
Thank you. And finally, this evening, we have Mr. Kurt Flora. Mr. Flora, if you could also state your name and address for the record, you will have 3 minutes.
My name is Kurt Flora, 560 Andrews Lane, Corrales, New Mexico. I would just like to know why we are not on this agenda. 2.5 months ago or more, there was talks with the village attorney and my attorney. We should have been on this village council meeting for tonight. We should have been on last council meeting, but no, we were postponed again and again till next council meeting. You all received the package. I hope you all received this package. I would like you all to look over this package here, read it carefully, because what Mr. Sawina states in this whole package is the truth. What Bob Borman states in the package is the truth, okay? You'll see in the package, everything in yellow. I've been bringing this to your attention for years now. Everything in yellow was kept out of the written minutes. Everything that benefited us was kept out of the minutes. Go ask the village for a copy of Lori's written minutes, please, and compare them. Please compare them. You will see what we've been dealing with for 5 years. You'll see why we are up here fighting this fight for 5 straight years, and we haven't given into you, okay, into what's happened. And you'll see that Commissioner Sawina is correct. And on the next, we're on the next agenda. I don't understand why we are third on the agenda. Our dealing with this has been going on for 5 years. We should be first on the agenda next week, not third. Also, they're working on the parking lot, the new growers market. I'm requesting a no parking sign on the east side of Corrales Road so that we can get out onto Corrales Road now, because they're going to be parking all down that wall in front of Huff Road, okay? They already do it down at the growers market. They park on the east side of the road. Now we're going to have the same problem, if not worse, trying to get out of our driveway because we can't see the traffic coming. We need no parking signs along that wall on Corrales Road across from that growers market, please. Okay. Next 2 weeks, we will see you. We were put on the agenda. And I hope you will be able to respond to me. I would also like for Melanie to be able to bring the ordinances up on the screen. The Corrales ordinances, when I say 1883 B2, please bring it up so I can explain
That's your time, Mr. Flores. Thank you.
1886, 1887, because there's going to be a lot of explaining of the Corrales ordinances.
That's your time, Mr.
What
Flores.
they really are and what we're being forced into. Thank you.
Mayor, that's everyone.
That's it? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So
moved.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. So I have a motion to approve in a second. Does anybody want anything taken off the consent agenda?
Mayor, I just have a comment I want to insert on the minutes. I think it's on page 30 under the short-term residences. I stated I did not have a problem with number 1, basically. I want to insert the word "not" somewhere in there, but the second statement is true. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Anyone else? If not, how do you vote, Councilor Mira?
Yes, sir.
Councilor Woolman?
Aye.
Councilor Knight?
Aye.
Councilor Alsobrook?
Aye.
Councilor Burkett?
Aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
So if there's no objection, I would like to take a brief break, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Okay? And we'll be back here at, say, 8:15. That's 8 minutes. Okay. We start. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to new business now. Consideration, action, and approval of proclamation 23-08 proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month in the Village of Corrales. Would you like to speak, Leon?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Mayor,
Oh, he does. You are going to speak.
Yeah, Mayor,
my bedtime.
We just want to tell you, oh, I'm sorry. We just want to tell you how much we appreciate what you do in the village. Not just the pool, not just the soccer, not just the basketball, but all those things, you know, plus you work with your cohorts like Michael Chavez and Anthony Martinez. I mean, you know, you all do a good job together. So we really appreciate you, and we really appreciate our Parks and Rec Department, and we thought this was an appropriate thing to do.
So you can never leave.
So I can never leave.
You can, well, you can only leave if we drag you out.
Wow. No, well, thank you guys so much. It's been my department and we do enjoy working for the village. We have a very good department. We do get along with all the other departments. This summer has been a rough summer without fire and public works. The pool, I don't know how we would have been able to get it open. So I just want to say thanks. The new gym, if you guys haven't seen it, it's looking unbelievable. All the uprights are up in it right now, and it's really, really beautiful. It's going to be a huge asset to this village.
Do you have a completion date?
January.
This year, next year?
Next year. But we are,
I
right
think
now.
we passed January of 23, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 24.
But every meeting we've had with them, we're ahead of schedule. I mean, I think we're a week ahead right now. And so really with what they're doing right now, they're just flying through this. And I mean, I really take my hats off to them because they're working in 100-degree weather on top of roofs, welding. And I mean,
yeah,
I'm sweating for them. Well, I am sweating too, but I mean, they're fully clothed. I at least have shorts and a tank top on. So, but no, thank you guys so much. And we do appreciate everything you guys do for us.
Vice versa. Because of that, Mr. Mayor, he wants us to proclaim July as the Parks and Recreation Month in the.
Well, actually, it's a Parks and Rec month, and we just thought we would, make a special deal of Lynn, so. Okay, yes, ma'am.
So I move, we approve 2308.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. There you go.
Good night.
Thank you. You go home, go to bed. Okay, now we move to consideration, action, and approval of resolution 23-47, approval of liquor license waiver procedure. This is the procedure that they were looking for some time ago, and someone came before the village to get a liquor license approval, having been turned down by APS. Now we have a procedure we can follow. Yes, sir.
I move that we approve Res 2347.
Can I have a motion to approve and a second from Councilor Waldman? Any discussion? Councilor Alsobrook?
It's just a question, and I can take it up later with Councilor Audio. Has anyone ever challenged, based on separation of church and state principles, that churches have this 300-foot boundary that they can weigh in on?
Not that I'm aware of, not in New Mexico. It's an interesting concept that has been there for a very long time in the liquor ordinance or statute, sorry. And but there really has been no issues raised with it that I'm aware of. There might be some old cases on it, but I have not seen them. Thanks.
Councilor Murray?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Council Audio, I want to thank you for doing this because I think it puts the village in a better standing. And if anybody does try to challenge it, I think we got some legs to stand on.
Right. Councilor Burkett?
The one thing that I would think it's missing, and it's in state statute, so maybe it's unnecessary to be here, is that if we do approve this, we have to approve it without any sort of special considerations. And I don't know if that's something we should specifically note in the policy, or if that's something just because it's state statute is already assumed.
Well, and it's a very unique situation because they're actually giving us discretion when in almost all other instances they don't. So they've granted us this discretion. We try to describe what that discretion is. And I think it suffices. When we come up for a hearing on it, if we start to go astray and go into some areas that we can't regulate, then I'll reel you back.
Well, my reading of it is that we have no ability to regulate hours, no ability to regulate alcohol limit, no ability to regulate anything. It's a yes or a no.
All of that's true.
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty well covered in the policy. No. Anybody else?
On that last point.
Councilor
So
Mira.
therefore, when it comes up, we could still, individually, we could vote no on that particular issue, but this is not a given then, with regards to the vote.
No, you always have the opportunity to vote, your conscience or whatever, whatever you think is reasonable and right. No, this is not to tell you that, oh, you have to do this. No, heavens no. But for example, we're talking about alcohol or hours or whatever. We individually can consider, okay, if some place is open like 5 to 10, well, the school is closed, at 3:30 or thereabouts. You say, well, school is closed, there's not going to be an issue. There won't be, traffic around the area from that facility. We know the school is going to have tons of traffic. And so we don't want to add to that burden for the school. And those people will probably have their hours later, so that it doesn't add to their burden either. But that's something we individually, but we are covered, our council, if we make a decision, let's say, for example, APS says no, and we say, well, sure, we think it's a good thing for the village because it's done it before at that facility, at that place. We have established a policy to deal with it. If we don't have a policy, then our hands are really tied.
And that's why I asked that question. It was a two-part question and that would be, I could vote no on that particular issue for that particular reason. And then going along with that just a little bit further on the previous question, there was times when we were able to make a decision on a liquor place open up, but no miniatures being sold. We'll allow you to come in, but we're not going to allow, the city will not, at that time, the city of Albuquerque is not going to allow miniatures for sale. And that decision was pretty much left up to the council, and our point would be the village council. That's still an option open to us?
I don't know. I mean, I would think that if that's a state statute, I would say, no, it probably is still, that option probably still is open, but I'll defer to Councilor Audio.
So let's focus on the only time this waiver is going to come up is when we have a hearing and the proposed licensee is within 300 feet of a church or school. The state says we have the authority to, even if the school or church says, no, we don't want it there, we have the authority to place it there over their objection. And we can, that's what these criteria are there to do. And only that, only in those circumstances. So we'll say, okay, even though the school doesn't want it, this establishment happens to be on the other side of this acequia and road with houses in between. So even it's within 300 feet, but it has no physical contact either by site or road, maybe we'll allow it. This gives us the discretion to do that. That's all we'll be considering. The rest of the state liquor laws are exactly like they've always been, and our discretion is very limited, as it always has been.
Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. This come up, just had a thought. Does this conflict with the cannabis rules at all within the 300 feet issue?
Cannabis isn't mentioned in this at all.
I know that, but the cannabis has a 300-foot exclusion as well, I
Well, then
think.
it can keep its 300 foot.
It's always been separate. For example, the Cannabis Act only mentions schools and doesn't mention churches.
Okay.
In our ordinance, we chose to include churches, which we debated at the time, but it's there. But there does not need to be an exclusion allowed with a process like this for cannabis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that everybody? Anybody else want to talk? Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. We do have a motion and a second, okay. For Resolution 23-47, approval of liquor license waiver procedures. How do you vote, Councilor Miera?
Yes.
Councilor Waldman?
Aye.
Councilor Knight?
Aye.
Councilor Alsobrook?
Aye.
Councilor Burkett?
Aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Okay, so it's been approved. Consideration action approval of ordinance 23-03 zone map amendment continued from June 13, 2023 meeting. We have a problem in that we have not received verification of an up-to-date, true to form, whatever zone map from the Mr. Cog. So we are going to ask to defer this to the first meeting in August. Okay.
Correct.
Does anybody have any objection to that, since we don't have,
Is this the second time we've deferred this one?
this is the second time we've deferred this.
Okay.
But as long as we can defer it to a date certain, we don't have a problem.
Okay, and I guess my question is just, is there a reason why we don't have this yet if we've had expectations to have it twice now and they have not delivered?
I'll let you speak to that.
So part of the issue happened with a miscommunication that we didn't actually need to adopt a whole new zone map for changing the Anderson property. So first, we need to change the Anderson property. And so that ordinance will be approved on July 25th at our next meeting. In addition to that, since we've already gone ahead and said we're going to update the zone map, we did discover when we published the map that there were some issues with some things not being on that map that had been changed. So I'm not sure what happened there with our, we don't have GIS mapping software to be able to do these maps on our own. So we rely on Mr. Cog to create the maps for us. And so, they had some changeover, we had some changeover. So at this point, we're trying to combine two maps that we had. We had the one that they had and the one that we had. And, trying to do that through emails and pinpointing the exact locations and sending legal descriptions back and forth. It's taken some time. So long story short, we need one more extension so that we can get the Anderson property changed, and then our zone map can be correct, but there are still 2 or 3 properties that we're trying to make sure are correctly identified on our maps.
So I will need a motion to defer that to the August 8th meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second and a second? I think we're going to title this ordinance, when it ultimately passes, which I anticipate it will, as the Stuart Murray ordinance.
Memorial.
Because he's the one who found, and it's a good thing, he found the problems, and he discovered the problems, and now we're trying to correct them. Counselor Amira, how do you vote?
Yes, sir.
Counselor Woolman?
Aye.
Counselor Knight?
Aye.
Counselor Alsobrook?
Aye.
Counselor Burkett?
Aye.
Counselor Murray?
Aye.
So now we'll move on to the ICIP list. Who would like to start? Yes, sir.
Well, Mayor, I'll just briefly state that the way I rank things is I tried to give a little bit of everything across the board so that it didn't fall all on one department. So if you look at my rankings, it's the only reason I did what I did was to make sure that each department at least had something in their list that wasn't down at the bottom. So
Yeah.
that was my reasoning for the way I did things. And I did put the fire
suppression.
Fire suppression, well, it's the firehouse basically is number one.
Fire substation 3.
Fire substation 3 is number one, because I think that's what the chief had indicated to me.
Yes.
That was my main reason for that. I still support fire suppression, I still support the police and anything else we're trying to do, but I just tried to distribute it across the board.
I believe that's Chief Martinez's number 1 also, fire substation number 3. So, Councilor Burkett, do you have any?
I do. I just, I mean, I think I'm the question mark, the response.
Yes.
So just if we can add that to the packet at some point so I can filter through the compliments, concerns, and complaints. And I did this on my phone, which was probably a poor choice, but it was challenging. It was overwhelming. It was an overwhelming list to look at on my phone. And next time I will not make that mistake because I really had a difficult time. And there were some that really, in my opinion, blended together. So it was more challenging than I expected it to be. So, but I appreciate the fact that we're doing it in a more transparent manner. Everyone's stuff's out there and they got ranked accordingly.
Now, Melanie, you have a combined list there at the end, don't you, with things ranked based on how,
Yeah, I
the
didn't.
combined numbers?
Yes, the list that has the red text on it, that's the list ranked as you voted on it. So what I did is I took the answers that were given, I did some math. So, journalism major and math, little challenging, but I took the averages and then SurveyMonkey wasn't quite as great about giving me numbers as I thought it would be. It didn't actually say, well, this was number 1. It gave us that lovely little bar chart. And, Sky came in at one point, I was cutting and pasting, trying to figure out,
Right.
like how does this go? Can I make this actually look like a nice bar chart? But no, the list that is the suggested changes with the red text on it, those are ranked in order of how everybody voted on them.
Yes, sir.
Just one more point for future stuff, and I'm not even sure if it's possible to do this, but if you look at the vote distribution, the higher something was on the list seems to be clearly associated with where it ended up in the rankings, just because if it starts at the top, it's very difficult. I mean, you have to click the button a lot of times to move it to the bottom.
Right, and I did put it in order of how it was on the last year's list, and
Right.
so.
So I don't know if there's a way to randomize that to where each person gets a different order or something to where
Yeah, I don't know.
that way they all get a fair shot of being ignored. It's like we flip
They
a
all-
coin to see whose last name's gonna be first on the ballot because whoever's listed on the top is gonna get more votes just because you have to move the pencil 1 less millimeter. So I think there was some function to that as well, that things higher up the list performed markedly better than things lower on the list.
And that's what I was hoping this discussion could be tonight was, if there's something that the council feels is wildly out of place, please let me know. And then at the next meeting, on the July 25th meeting, you will have a final list for approval with a resolution. And then that's what will get entered into the state system.
And that list will be, you can modify it. It's up until we actually send it up to Santa Fe. Counselor Knight.
Yeah, I just needed to explain my reasoning for mine. I saw that there was a lot of fire equipment and things on here, so I just, kind of put the suppression as a whole umbrella of what the fire department needs. Because I didn't know exactly what a bioreactor membrane is.
That's sewer.
Okay, because my wastewater collection was number
You talking
1.
about the membrane bioreactor?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sewer. That's so that's a sort of I guess I hate to describe it this way, but sort of an out of the box approach to recycling water. The idea being to take the step system water, put it through the membrane bioreactor, pipe it down to the Bosque and use it for fire control. So it's a little bit of fire control, a little bit of sewer.
Okay. But you know, the fire, Infotech upgrades, fire facility, training facilities, to me, it was all, to me, under fire suppression. So
Well,
that's why it was lower down on my list rather than fire suppression was number 4.
We probably, the only thing we probably need more than money for fire suppression is water. I mean, you know, it's, who's next? Councilor Woolman.
Mayor, when we submit this list to our representatives, do we have to specify a dollar number? Or is it that next to last column that said not yet funded?
It's submitted to DFA.
Right.
And the legislators will get it later on when it comes up in the session. And it's always suggested to put a number on there, and you need to put a number on there. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just Mayor and councilors. So when the ICIP list is due in August, so we have to have it input into the state system by August 18th. Then in November, December, that's when the capital outlay portal opens up. And then it pulls from our ICIP list for those numbers. So whatever we put on the ICIP list, that's what goes in the capital outlay numbers.
Request.
And we can adjust it when we place that request. But so we want to try and get the best numbers possible on our ICIP because it does pull from that system to populate the request for
So
capital outlay.
perhaps 2 examples. One would be fire suppression remaining $770,000. That's the red column, right? For the Arts Community Education Center, it's $8 million. Okay, so what do we submit? I would assume we submit the 770 since that's already mostly paid for, and this is we'd be completing that process. And governors always like to see completed projects. How do we handle the ACE, for example?
Tell them we need a lot of money.
A lot is sufficient.
6 million, yeah, a lot is sufficient. No, we can put the 6 million or 8 million or whatever the number is.
Okay.
It depends on, so if we decide, we don't like the idea of phasing these constructions. We'd like to have all the money.
Right.
And in fact, the builders like to have all the money too, obviously. And we are looking for ways that perhaps we could split it up. So one of the things that we have been talking about is, for example, let's say bonds, $1 million. And that's probably too much for what I'm talking about because I still haven't gotten a firm estimate from Facility Bill, for example. But I wanted to get plan design, construction documents, a digital 3D walkthrough, and how much would that be? And it's probably, according just, talking to Mark Steinkamp out there at the gym, $500,000. So that wouldn't be a full million, but we would have something that's right here
Concrete to start with.
that we could say, hey, here, we've got this. If we do in fact get a big lump sum of money like we did with fire suppression last year, I think did we hit 3 million or close to? I can't remember, but anyway, it was a lot of money. That would help a great deal. But we have a different situation with that because we have a lot of skin in the game, so to speak. And if we do a bonding, for example, that's even more skin in the game. And then we can start looking at perhaps our legislators in Washington and say, look, we really need this. We'd like to get this done. And this is what we've done to this point.
Always looks good.
Because I don't know that any of our state legislators are going to come up with that kind of money. And we're still looking for other places. Tanya's, she's trolling the ocean. She's looking for money all the time.
I think something opens up next month.
Yeah.
For that
Let's hope.
that grant program, yeah.
Let's hope.
And the other thing, Councilor Merrick is the expert on this, but once you get into the fog of the legislative session and one thing is being traded off for something else between legislators and
Anything.
the one, top number one thing could all of a sudden be number 6, and number 6 could be number 2, and whatever.
All you need is a fire, and there goes all the money to that part of the state too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? John, did you want to say something? Thought you raised your hand earlier.
No, I didn't, but I can, thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
Well, I want to give you the opportunity to speak.
Oh, I appreciate that. I had put the Meadowlark Lane improvements close to the top, of course, my district, but I think we've tortured the good people on that road long enough for well over a decade, and this thing, and we need to just bring some closure to the project there. And I guess
We
the
can
only
come
other-
up with,
I'm sorry?
if we can come up with a plan to deal with the Meadowlark issue,
Yeah.
and get it done, you feel like the people on the road would be,
They'd have a party.
they'd have a party?
They would block off the road
There you go.
and invite Rio Rancho to come to the party.
No.
No, they would not.
How about a GoFundMe?
So, some of them still remember when that road did not go through, and they talk about, they
that's
talk
too
about
bad.
grabbing a bulldozer.
Okay.
I like Counselor Burkett, I used my phone, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It took longer than I expected.
It was like a game.
Yeah.
I couldn't win.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know what's going on. And then I guess the only other comment, I was surprised about the electric car charging station. I guess the way I looked at it is, if you got your electric car in the village and you're coming down here from the northeast side, or wherever you're coming, the Northwest Sanders, wherever you're coming from, man, if you don't have enough charge in your car to get here from there, you probably shouldn't have gotten in the doggone thing. And everyone else who's going to be using it is, who else is coming from outside the village? I don't know. Just, it seemed like we're probably way ahead of the curve on that one.
We may be, but Chief Mangy Capper wants to get an electric car.
Well, that's different then. Yeah. We'll get
if our police officers have electric cars, they need to be charged.
We'll get a whole.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we beat that horse. How about discussion on changes to the animal ordinance? And we're not voting on the ordinance itself. We're just discussing the changes that have been done. And I think you're the one who actually brought this forward, Bill. Do you want to make any comments?
I do have a couple of things, but perhaps Councilor Audio, we talked very briefly before the meeting. There are some other communities that you're looking at for some of the language.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think between staff at the village, animal control services they were very helpful in providing a lot of input, as well as the council. And so the draft isn't in a bad place. I think we're getting close to something that's going to be functional. What we did get, though, was Randy Van Vleck in our office works closely with Best Friends Animal Society and their representatives who help write ordinances for local governments. So we've got a recent draft that came out of Deming that had their changes to the Deming ordinance. So we're going to take a look, and I think it's worth taking one more discussion of this before we do a final with those changes. They're, for example, we still refer to, in different parts of the ordinance, animal control versus animal services or animal care at different points. And the other thing they do is it's kind of got more cutting edge ideas on how to best deal with animals. So we'll take a look at those, bring them back in a upcoming meeting, and then it should be pretty well ready to go. But we'll share those if, with the mayor's permission, we'll get those changes made, and then we'll send it out to everyone, so everybody can be looking at that.
Great. Yeah. I do have a couple of specifics, if I could, Randy. You mentioned one, consistency for animal service as opposed to animal control. The only place I saw where it jumps out is there's an animal control shelter rather than animal services shelter. The discussion on rabies, it indicates that an animal is to be destroyed and then tested for rabies. it seems a little backwards to me and somewhat inhumane. And I think there may be a better way of dealing with that. Section 613, vertebrate pest control. 1B is shooting the animal. My understanding is that there is, you cannot discharge a firearm in the village. So there's a bit of inconsistency there. And I'm not sure we should encourage people to decide on their own to be shooting animals. It states shooting based upon the reasonable belief of an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury to humans, domestic animals, or livestock. I guess who determines the reasonable belief standard in that, number one? And number two, I guess the question is, when do we go from being an animal-friendly village to shooting possible predators on site? So I would strongly urge that somebody take a look at that. Be consistent with the findings in the opening of your the draft, the way we treat animals in the village. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Good. I think yes, Stuart.
Well, I was going, if you want to make a comment, go ahead.
No, I didn't, somehow I just blasted right past that, and I agree. I don't think we should be shooting animals in the village. Shooting, I mean, just because you think you can hit some animal doesn't mean you necessarily will, nor does it necessarily mean the bullet will stop there, depending on what you use. So, no, I think given the technology today, we can certainly use other means to entrap or catch an animal. Go ahead, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor. So when I was looking through this, I went back and found my original comments I think I sent to Randy, but there seemed like there were some definitions that we could probably use. One was companion animal. I thought that probably could use definition. There's also, you have a section here, talk about holders of hobby breed permit, and you say that this is really broad. I was just curious about how would you tighten that focus up on that?
Sorry, I didn't hear what kind of permit?
It's on, let me get to, it's on page.
It's on hobby breeders, isn't it?
Hobby breeders permit will be exempted from having an individual pet license. There's a comment there that says that's a very broad statement. I was just curious, how would you change the focus of that to make it narrow it down or somewhat?
I don't know whose statement that was.
I think that came from Corey.
Is that from Corey?
Could
Yeah.
have been from Corey. We'll take a look at it and just see if it can be tightened up.
But there was also here, you were talking about mammals and birds. And of course, at the very top, we talked about it being in the animal kingdom. Well, that kind of covers everything other than bacteria and cellular stuff. So I just wonder, should we just be consistent and say that animals will have potable water or food or something like that? So that you don't narrow it down just to mammals and birds. You cover the entire spectrum of whoever has a pet.
That's one where I think it will be helpful to look at best practices that have been established by the Friends of Animals, because it is, when you have a situation where there are wild animals that people have taken in as pets, and then the care of them is different than companion animals. And it's just a very awkward thing to regulate. So I think we should really take a look at what the best practices are in regulating that.
Yeah, because I think the first four say mammals and birds, and then down to the very bottom, it says animals. So I think there was some inconsistency there as well. The other one I think I had, this may have been Corey's comments again. Trying to look at what I can, service animal. Another definition was for basic animal services and emergency animal services. Do we need to define those? I mean, as you know, basic being the maintenance of an animal so that they get their shots and so forth, versus emergency care where they are taken to a facility that is established to can take care of an animal. Do we need to have definitions because it's mentioned inside the ordinance?
Take a look at it.
Okay. And I think it seemed like to me there was one more I had, but I can email you what I think I find it. But anyway,
Counselor Knight?
I did find it.
Oh, you did?
611-1, it says about malicious restraint. We mentioned dogs, but how about other animals? Do we need to include other animals in that form? It's in 611. I. Maybe that's already covered, but I think that's my final comment. Sorry, Councilor Knight.
Counselor Knight?
Yeah, on page 17, again, I know this is mostly geared towards cats and dogs, but it does say about letter E, it says defecation, no person shall allow an animal to defecate on public property or private property. Well, you know, horses are gonna, nobody cleans up after their horses.
No.
You should.
Although I never did,
But all the people who own dogs do, right?
they should.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good goal, you know, to clean up. It might be difficult if you're riding your horse and you have to jump off and load up. I have Counselor Woolman here.
Randy, if we were to put in, I agree with Councilor Murray. If we were to put in after companion animal, the first time it's mentioned, just put in parens, dogs and cats. Would that work, or is it not broad enough?
Right now, that is the world of companion animals.
Right.
That is what is generally regulated as a companion animal in the HART ordinance in Albuquerque.
So if we specify in the first time it's mentioned in parens, dogs and cats, and then we can go on with companion animals throughout?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Murray.
Oh, just one other thing. In the very back page, 17, animal limits and restrictions, what happened to section C? There's either it needs to be aligned, realignment, or.
Gosh, got dropped. All right. Counselor Alsobrooke.
Just to say, following up on Counselor Knight's comments, that section E for defecation, the companion animals, dogs and cats are obligate carnivores, whereas horses and cattle and livestock are typically herbivores. The risks to the public health from those two types of waste are very different. So it may be worthwhile to carve out the herbivore exception.
Yeah.
Or we could sell Village of Corrales shovels.
We're ready project.
Okay.
While you're on that point, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Just curious, because what is the penalties on this, G being one of the more important ones, that the animal officer can't be attacked in any way by anybody. What are the penalties?
Would we have this under something like fees or penalty?
For which?
For like interference with an animal services officer, interference with the police, it's like being interfering with a police officer in the
Those would
performance of his
probably
duty.
be under.
Something like that.
Fees assessed by the court.
Yeah.
Well, and all of our authority for us imposing penalties for violation of our ordinance are the same. We can't have higher penalties than state law allows.
Okay.
But if the circumstances warrant, they can be cited under state law. And that's where they get the stiffer penalties for example, cruelty to animals.
All right. I was just more worried about the horses up and down. Didn't want the penalty to be too hard on it.
All right. Counselor Woolman, will you raise your hand?
Yeah, just a general comment if I could. It's not for ordinance, but for considerations of policy. We all see the statistics that the village contains a significant number of senior citizens. And many of these older citizens have companion animals. Well, perhaps, as I say, not part of the ordinance, but policy should reflect the sensitivity that allows for animal services to assist with an animal, which would no longer be cared for by their owners or by friends or family. We come across a number of instances like that. The animals live in the village, and given all that's included in the ordinances, animal services should be given the discretion to provide that kind of assistance. It's the right thing to do. An example, 92-year-old man sent by his family to Indiana to an Alzheimer's facility, inpatient Alzheimer's facility. 3 cats were left behind. They were told, well, he has a sister, the sister can take care of the cats. The sister's 94 years old. There's got to be a way that we can assist our senior citizens in this village who care very much for their animals, and to figure out a way that animal services could be of support. So again, not part of the ordinance, but just the general policies.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything about hoarding in here?
About what?
Like hoarding animals? Hoarding, cats or dogs?
I don't think so.
I don't recall anything.
There's a cap on intact animals per household, but I didn't see anything.
There's a cap on what?
Intact animals, so ones that aren't neutered, you're limited to, this limits to 4. I didn't see a section for, you got them all neutered and you're feeding them and they're not abused or anything. I don't think we have anything.
Yeah, I don't think we have any limits on how many animals you can have or anything like that.
Just,
we'll let you know if you
Councilor
cross
Burkett.
the line.
for another thing that rhymes with hoarding, what about boarding? Is there a policy, do we have policies on boarding as well? That's what
If you're boarding animals, you're a business.
right, but do we have, I mean, so I don't think our business rules address
You
specifically.
have to have a license, and if you're boarding animals, which would include things like horses and perhaps dogs, like a kennel, you have to have a business license and you have to have a fire inspection. I mean, yeah, there are rules that cover that,
Not in here.
not in this section.
We have rules that cover that, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Now, this won't go away. You guys can sit and think about it more as time goes by. We can always, and then we're going to bring it back probably a couple of 3 meetings or a couple of meetings or something like that.
Yes.
But some of that information will be circulated to you by email. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, get that clear.
Mayor, my only other comment was, it was hard to distinguish what the original ordinance had versus what we received. And it looks like there was modifications made in this packet, but it didn't really identify the old portions. And so it was really difficult to find if things had been inserted or not.
We'll do a red line.
Okay.
Okay. We good? Okay, so it looks like the future agendas that we were talking about, approval of ordinance 20, say what? Oh, gosh, committee ordinances, how could I leave that? Okay, discussion of changes to the committee ordinances. Thank you, sir. Now, so we have a number of committees in the village. And we're starting to review some of those, and I understand there's been some other interest in different communities, committees by members of the council. That maybe we have a few too many committees. Anybody see something in there they would like to discuss? Yes, sir, John.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't, it's not specifically here, but I wonder if we should be considering, the standing permanent committees to receive pay as well.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
I'm wondering if we should consider, any of the other committees besides the council and judge and mayor's office to receive pay.
I'd rather not go there.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So one of the issues I think we had was there was a resolution or ordinance passed back in 2017, and there were amendments made to that ordinance that did not make it in. Well, it turns out one of them did and one didn't. And the Bicycle Advisory Committee wanted to be 7 members, and they only got to be 5.
Right.
So Melanie found the amendment to the 2017 ordinance, and the Bosque Commission was correctly set to 7 members. Bosque, or the Bicycle Advisory Commission, was not. So this kind of corrects that issue so that the bicycle group can now have a maximum of 7 members. And when I met with Melanie and I think Rick, Counselor Mier and I met, we just kind of went through what was there to make it consistent with the other things. And some of the problems I think Melanie was having is not getting timely reports from a lot of these committees.
Correct.
And I think that this will help correct some of that too.
In some cases, no reports.
Yes. And I think the issue would be if they're not meeting at a consistent business, well, then, okay, let's make it a quarterly or maybe twice a year type thing.
Yeah, well, I know we have one committee that we have to keep, Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, and they only meet on call, basically.
They have to meet once every 5 years.
Yeah, it's pretty much on call.
Are they even alive?
Well, it's primarily focused on the far northwest sector. It's the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, and their main job is to set the impact fees for the far northwest sector.
And we can't get rid of them.
And
Because
we
we have
can't.
the impact fees, we have to keep the.
Yes, until everything is covered.
Yeah, but they still have to go through the 2-year cycle of reapplying, right?
I don't think it's 2 years, is it? You still had
Not for
me
them.
on there, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, no, they are for 5 years. Their appointments are for 5 years.
Yeah.
And
So they
we
can go
have,
to one meeting
Yeah.
in their entire appointment.
yes,
Jealous, aren't you?
yes.
Well, I had more than one, but I mean, it's,
And we have a couple, like the Lodgers Tax Board,
Right.
their appointment is until they decide they want to leave. Senior Advisory Committee is also that way. They are appointed until they decide they no longer want to serve.
Is that by ordinance?
That, I believe those are in our ordinance. I'll have to go back and double check what's in there.
so this is one of the things we've sort of been looking at. There are a lot of different things.
Yeah,
Yes,
the-
ma'am. Sky, go ahead.
The Senior Advisory Committee has their own bylaws that were set by Sandoval County, so that's kind of where that comes in with those, but yeah, I think the other ones, it's in our ordinances.
So we have a number of them that we are looking to modify if necessary. And we would appreciate fresh eyes and help if you guys, want to read through these things and see what these committees do. It's very helpful to bring it up. And also it's amazing what you'll find out has been passed in the past as far as committees go. And sometimes a committee is formed, they do a job, and they never go away. So, okay. You think we've started that discussion?
Yes.
Perhaps it will continue? Okay.
And I think your last statements on A, on 127, they start away, but they said in here 2 years, and then you're gonna have to do something about it. So you're kind of like forcing the issue to be brought up yet again. That's fine.
Yes, they'll go away, perhaps, sometime sooner. That's it. And there's a number of things that don't have any kind of sunset on the agreements that we have. And we need to always go back and look at them because things change, situations change. One I can think of just tonight, Corrales Historical Society, they do a great job, but we hadn't received a report from them in several years, and we're supposed to get an annual report from them. And
We did get it this year, though.
so, I'm sorry, what?
We did get it this year.
Yes, we did. We had to tell them we wanted it. Yeah. Okay, I think we've completed the business, and we were going to talk a little bit about future agenda items. And so we have approval of ordinance 23-05, rezoning of the Anderson property. That's the final vote. Approval of ordinance 2306, increasing the pay for elected officials. That's the final vote. Hearing of Flora subdivision, it will not be third on the agenda. It will be the first thing we do.
That's just third here.
Yeah, I know. We'll approve the budget on July 25th, final budget. We'll approve the ICIP, so, do your homework, ask questions, send me emails, send Melanie emails, and we'll respond as we get information. And then we're going to do a work study with the P&Z Commission on 7/27/23. Yes, Councilwoman.
Mayor, can I perhaps suggest that meeting of 7/27/23 with planning and zoning, as an addendum to that meeting, might be a good time to discuss the bond issue and what ideas we may have leading up to the August 8th resolution. Otherwise, we won't have any time to really discuss that.
Well, we're going to talk about on the, we can actually put it on the 25th.
Yeah, I think
too.
we were talking about putting it on
Yeah,
the
we can put it
agenda
on the
for
25th. It's just not listed here.
Yeah. And then also on the 25th, Raina will have approvals for her fourth quarter report and capital outlay, I'm sorry, not capital outlay, capital assets list. So we'll have approvals for those two. Those are things that she needs to be able to move forward with the budget and her year end and beginning of the year paperwork. So it will be a long meeting probably.
Do I have to bring a statement back?
And Stuart, you wanted something,
Well, August, the first August meeting, we can talk about the putting items on the agenda and procedures. Because I think there should be a discussion between you and the council about who puts items on the agenda and how they get there. And, you know, it's one of those things where counselors probably want to submit things, but how we get them on the agenda sometimes gets a little testy, it seems like. So we need to have a discussion about how we want to put things on the agenda. And I know the ordinance basically says, give them to the clerk by 5 o'clock on the date before. And that's about it.
It doesn't work like that, but yeah, it's okay. We can have a discussion about it.
Well, I think we should, because.
And we're going to try to do that first. Did you write that down?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me we need to have a discussion about that.
I will say historically, previous mayors, the ones I've been with, Gasteyer and Kameniak, they just basically, they control the agenda. You could tell them, and you would present your case and talk about what you wanted, and then they would do whatever investigation was necessary, talk to the attorney as necessary, and put together whatever resolution or ordinance you were focused on, or whatever you want to discuss, get some data.
I know, I understand that, Mayor, but sometimes I think that I've tried to submit things like with the previous administration, and it just died. And consequently, you know, we should have an expectation if any of the counselors submit things to you for the agenda, we should have an expectation that, you know, either it goes on the agenda or a some date certain.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I would like to think that I've done that most of the times. There are probably a few that died. I mean, I forget things.
I do too. So I'm with you.
It would be good for the process as.
It would be good to have a policy.
Be clear.
A defined policy.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
It's just gray and fuzzy like.
Okay.
It might be.
All right, well, think about it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do that in August, okay. Let me write that down so I don't forget. That wasn't meant to be funny, actually. Okay, well, we've completed the business of the village. Meeting's adjourned.
Brother.